Sup nerds? So Pokemon Gold and Silver released on the 3DS last week, and I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about why I think those two games are the best sequels in the whole series. Even though I think Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver are the best games in the whole series, I kind of wanted to go back and talk about why the original ones truthfully stand the test of time, when some other originals don't. So even though this game is a sequel to Pokemon Red and Blue or Red and Green, in a way it's kind of the first Pokemon game. This was the first time that the world was already established and that they had a brand to uphold. Even though Gold and Silver look a lot like the originals, they act as a juxtaposition to Pokemon Red and Blue. Pokemon Red and Blue was really science fiction heavy, with a lot of the plot of the game having to do with the technology involved in the world. Even the overarching lore that was introduced within Pokemon Red and Blue had to do with cloning the original Pokemon that evolved into all the other kinds of Pokemon. And I mean Darwinian evolution, not Pokemon evolution. In opposition to that, Pokemon Generation 2's lore really focused on the mythology and the legends surrounding it. Generation 2 definitely contrasted itself from the original generations, but it totally improved and expanded upon them as well. Not only were 100 additional Pokemon added in this generation, but many key features that have become synonymous with the series was added, including breeding, held items, shinies, and player rematches. There were new ways to evolve Pokemon, and Pokemon Crystal added sprite animations, the option to play as a girl, and the Battle Tower, which would later evolve into the Battle Frontier. Generation 2 also elected to hold the hands of players who were only familiar with the original generations, so like everybody. I mean, the concept of 150 Pokemon was drilled into your head, but when Johto was released, that was a whole new world. A whole new world.
It's a whole new world we live in. Pokemon Johto.
I adore most of the Pokemon that were introduced. I mean, you have Heracross, Piloswine, Houndour, and many older Pokemon got new evolutions like Crobat and Pichu. Despite the fact that there were only 100 Pokemon introduced in this generation, which is kind of on the low end for Pokemon, I always have trouble determining which 6 Pokemon I'm going to use on my team because of how great the new selection is. In this particular run-through, I ended up with my final team being a Quagsire named Warper, instead of Wooper, an Ursaring named Kuma-chan, named after a teddy bear from that one episode of the anime with all the boys, a Xatu named Magic Burb, a Houndoom named Beelzepup, a Piloswine named Nugget, and an Ampharos named Bah. It took me extra long to beat this game this time around because I kept changing out my Pokemon and having to grind levels back up. I also experimented with a Blossom, a Heracross, which I spent hours trying to find, only to ditch later in the game, a Crobat named Zorbit, and a Slugma, who I used my only Master Ball on because just look at him. His sprite art in this game is horrible. I wanted to give him a comfortable place to stay. I named him Slurms Mackenzie. When the game starts, you're greeted by a familiar face, Professor Oak. He gives you the rundown of Pokemon, and you're immediately thrust into the game. You get a Pokemon from a new professor studying breeding habits of Pokemon, Professor Elm. He sends you on an errand, and in return, you get a Pokemon. I know people love Cyndaquil, but Totodile is tied with Bulbasaur to be my favorite starter. On the way back, you meet your rival. Your rival steals his Pokemon from Professor Elm, and when you get back to the lab, an officer asks if you caught the trainer's name. Okay, so when you meet Silver, he tells you his name is question mark. I don't mean just like in the corner it says question mark, as in it's implied that you don't know what his name is. I mean, as you're leaving, he literally says, my name is question mark. As like a 6-year-old kid playing this, I took this very literally, and later, when the officer asks you if you caught his name, I wanted to comply with the officer. So I named my rival question mark. Yeah. His official name is Silver. Professor Elm encourages you to go catch Pokemon and take on the Gym Challenge with a new set of gym leaders unique to the Johto region. Gym leaders are sort of like Pokemon specialists who train one kind of Pokemon. They're essentially the game's bosses. I know most people watching this probably know that, but for the people who don't, this is what they are. If you beat all 8 gym leaders in the Johto region, you have a chance to go battle the Elite Four, who are the best of the best. And if you can beat them all, you potentially get to become Pokemon Champion. As you battle the gym leaders, you eventually come across Team Rocket. Team Rocket was this evil mafia organization from the first Pokemon games. Playing as Red, the player disbanded them. Gold and Silver takes place 2 years later, and they're trying to contact their former boss, Giovanni, in order to reform the organization. More than any other Pokemon game, the evil organization is downplayed. There are only 3 major encounters with Team Rocket in the whole game, and besides the last one, most of them take no time to complete. There also isn't any specific leader for Team Rocket. It's just a bunch of random executives and grunts, so they don't really have a face this time around. In the remakes, all of the executives were given character designs and personalities, but in the originals, it's just grunts and these nameless bosses. Giovanni never comes back, so defeating Team Rocket is very anticlimactic. However, there's lore that you read outside of the game that shows that there's a little bit more to this story. While you're going up against Team Rocket, your rival, Silver, keeps showing up, and for some reason he hates Team Rocket. Well, it turns out, he's the son of Giovanni. There's this character arc with Silver about him learning to love his Pokemon, but his intentions aren't made clear. He does eventually learn to care for his Pokemon, but there's never really this clear, established reason for his inability to do so. I mean, unless you look shit up on Bulbapedia. Actually, the way that you learn that he truthfully does care about his Pokemon is kind of cute. So there's a new evolutionary method introduced in this game called friendship. So if you use your Pokemon a lot, give them a lot of items, and you don't store them in the box, you will bond with it. And eventually that bond will be so strong that it will evolve into a new Pokemon. So throughout the whole game, Silver has this Golbat, and it's not until the last time you battle him that it's evolved into a Crobat, showing that he did learn to love his Pokemon. Cute. In Gen 1, catching them all really just meant going to find them all and checking them off of a list. Besides a few Pokemon you had to trade to evolve in Porygon, catching them all is relatively simple. New evolution methods like friendship and trading Pokemon with a held item start to make things a little more interesting. Many Pokemon and evolutionary items are tied to side missions that you need to complete in order to have an opportunity to catch them. For example, you'll only get the Sunstone by winning a bug catching contest, and you'll only get the King's Rock if you go back to early on in the game and use new moves to traverse an earlier cave. Certain Pokemon like Lapras are only available in a certain place at a certain time, and apparently Lapras has a catch rate of 0, because I wasted all of my Pokeballs on this thing. Also, with the introduction of breeding comes baby Pokemon. Many older Pokemon are granted an earlier evolution in their line that can only be obtained through breeding. Magby, Elekid, Pichu, Igglybuff, Cleffa, and Smoochum can only be obtained through breeding. Not to mention the introduction of roaming legendaries, which adds this whole new challenge to catching Pokemon like Entei, Rikyu, and Suicune. Yeah, that was on purpose. So every time you encounter a roaming legendary, they'll run away immediately. So after your first encounter, you basically have to chase them around the whole region unless you're able to trap them with a move like Mean Look. The day and night cycle also changes which kind of Pokemon you can encounter. Many dark Pokemon can only be caught at night. It's crazy how much more involved and varied catching Pokemon is in Gold and Silver when compared to Red and Blue. Things like the days of the week in the day and night cycle caused your save battery to drain and die out in Pokemon Gold and Silver, because the save battery was always on to track the time. The first Pokemon I ever trained to level 100 was a Froligator. That was on my Pokemon Crystal, and I lost my Pokemon Crystal for years, and when I found it again, I was so excited to see that Froligator. I was like 12 years old, and when I checked it, that's how I found out that the save batteries dried up. And now I can't find that Pokemon Crystal again. Yeah, the crazy thing is my Pokemon Red and Blue, which is technically an older game, still saves because it didn't have the day-night cycle. It never kept track of your time. So my Pokemon from Blue version are still there, but that Froligator that I spent so much time training is not. The original games Red and Blue are a mess for many reasons. Not only is it filled with glitches and characters that are horribly off-model, but its typing and attack system isn't very well balanced. Pokemon's battle system is kind of complex, but simplistically it operates like rock, paper, scissors. Water beats fire, fire beats grass, grass beats water. And this kind of balancing is true for all the types in the game. But in Generation 1, there was one type that got away with a lot. Psychic types had no real weakness. Pokemon like Heracross were added into the game with strong bug-type moves, and 2 new types were added to balance it out: Steel and Dark. Dark types are strong against Psychic types, and also Psychic is useless against Dark. But most Dark-type Pokemon aren't available until after you beat the Elite Four. When I first wrote this script, I had this whole point about how bullshit that was. Dark Pokemon were added as a balance, and they've been removed for most of the game. Not only that, but many Pokemon like Heracross and Xatu won't learn any good moves specific to its typing until it's at a very high level. But I've kind of found a justification for that. So Johto itself is one of the smaller Pokemon regions, and it doesn't provide a lot of experience points leading up to the Elite Four. But Pokemon Gold and Silver's Elite Four also has one of the lowest level caps to any Pokemon game. The highest level Pokemon you'll see is 50 versus 65 in the original game. To balance this out, many Pokemon don't learn really strong or even type-specific moves until much later in the game, and many strong Pokemon aren't even available until right before you reach the Elite Four, so there's a lower level cap. But unlike Generation 1, once you actually beat the Elite Four, the game is far from over. Once you beat the game, you get to travel to Kanto, the region from the original games. You get to challenge all of the same gym leaders who have now gotten much stronger since we last saw them. Although there's quite a bit to do in this version of Kanto, it's significantly consolidated from the original games. Many locations are blocked off or made smaller, and often it's for pretty depressing reasons. Viridian Forest has suffered from deforestation. The Pokemon Tower, a graveyard for dead Pokemon, has turned into a radio station. The Safari Zone has gone out of business. Red, the player from the first game, is missing, and Cinnabar Island was destroyed by its volcano. Not to mention all of the families in Saffron City which were displaced by the building of a new metro line. Wow. Not even the Pokemon world is safe from eminent domain. I know a lot of this in-game explanation is just there because they literally could barely fit Kanto itself onto the cart, but wow, a lot of that reasoning is really depressing. But hey, on Monday nights, Clefairies will dance around Mount Moon, and that's kind of neat. There's one mission specifically that you need to do in Kanto and a bunch of side missions. If you're just trying to beat all 8 gym leaders, you can do it in under 2 hours, as long as you're a high enough level. Pokemon Gold and Silver are 2 of my favorite games in the whole series. I can appreciate it from a critical standpoint because of how significantly it pushed the series forward, but also from that personal nostalgic standpoint, I still love them. Of course, Red and Blue will always have a certain appeal to it that could have never been overcome, but the same can be said for Gold and Silver, but it's also improved a lot, so the gameplay still holds up. Many of the concepts in Gold and Silver still hold up, and I think that was proven in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, the remakes. When Fire Red and Leaf Green came out, Kanto felt kind of sterile still because of how much Ruby and Sapphire and Gold and Silver were able to improve and expand upon the original games. So returning to that original region with not many updates besides a graphical one made the game feel kind of boring. But all it took for Heart Gold and Soul Silver to become what I consider to be the greatest Pokemon games ever was a new coat of paint and a couple new additional features. I'm glad that these games were re-released and finally I can actually transfer my Pokemon over to newer games, so hopefully I can prevent another Froligator situation from happening. But also giving me an excuse to play these games again because all of my batteries are dried up. I'm actually doing a live playthrough of Pokemon Silver on this channel on Friday nights, so if you want to stop by tomorrow night to see me do the first gym, you should do so. We're gonna have a fun time. Also, if you're going to be in Miami, Florida from October 6th to October 8th, 2017, I'm doing a panel at Animate Miami, which is this convention coming up. So if you're going to be there, come check it out. I'll be there. It's going to be neat. If this is your first video of mine, please consider subscribing, following me on social media, all that jazz. And thank you for watching. Have a good day. I'll see you next week.